So, does not being plant-based anymore make you a bit of an outcast in your profession?
Yes, and I would like to share a little bit about that too. Um, it's very prevalent in the healing arts. There's many teachers and thought leaders that still advocate that plant-based is better.
Carol, how did you find Carnivore?
Well, Dave, first I want to thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it. And to all the listeners out there, I hope that my little roundabout journey can inspire and help a few of you out there. Um, I have been on a lifelong journey of yo-yo weight loss from age 13. I started dieting because I wasn't a fat kid, but I was a chubby kid. And I was very athletic and I liked sports and things, but I just struggled with the weight. So starting at that age, of course, back in the day, it was calorie counting, and then it became the low fat craze, and you name it. I tried anything from Nutrisystem to Jenny Craig and they worked short term. They'd work for about a year. I was actually a spokesperson for our local Jenny Craig way back in the day. And twice in my life, Dave, I lost over 100 pounds, and other times it'd be 50 pounds or 35 pounds or 60 pounds, or the whole yo-yo cycle. um, and then on top of that, I about three times in my life had tried vegetarian, once in college, again in my 20s, and then um, back in the early mid 2000s I was vegetarian for a while. But none of that worked, especially with my athletic ability. So to make the long story short, to answer your question, about almost 7 years ago, I moved from Iowa in the US. I had lived in the Midwest, Iowa, most of my life. I moved to Arizona. And when I came here, I wasn't feeling my best. I wasn't feeling well. Um, I was having migraines and UTIs and a lot of joint pain. I'd already had rotator cuff surgery on one shoulder, and that was still painful. And my right shoulder was starting to get frozen. And for any of you that don't know what frozen shoulder is, it's just inability to move your shoulder to get to lift it up. And I was just like, what is going on? So I decided to try a naturopathic doctor. And she and oh, my thyroid was low, my libido was low, you name it, I was just a mess. And I didn't like thyroid medication. We tried that. I just nothing was really working for me. So I was out for I was I've been all my life an avid runner, and I was out for a run one day and had my headphones in, was listening to a summit. And now summits are very popular. Back then, there weren't that many, but on this summit were several inspiring thought leaders I'd been listening to. One was Dr. Perlmutter, who's a very much a keto advocate, especially for Alzheimer's, dementia. And then another person I admire and follow because I studied in his shamanic school, Dr. Alberto Villoldo. And both of them were really touting the benefits of going on a ketogenic way of eating, um, and how it would help your health and prevent future disease, especially, the Alzheimer's and such. So I I came in the door from that run. I said to my partner, I'm starting keto right now. And that was May of 2018. So, about 6.5 years ago. And keto worked for a while. It lifted the brain fog. It gave me energy because at that time I was having chronic fatigue, wasn't even up to seeing clients at that point. I just didn't have the energy or feel well enough. So it helped to some degree. And I'm like, wow, this is making a difference. Just switching to keto. Um, but with keto, it's easy to start making things with almond flour and things like that. And I stalled. Now, I wasn't doing this for weight loss, even though I wanted to lose 10, 20, 15 or 20 pounds. It wasn't really for weight loss, Dave. It was to feel better, to just start feeling better and have energy and be able to start seeing clients again and things. And so, but when I stalled out after about 3 months, my partner said, Carol, there is this subset I have found of keto, and it's called zero carb. Back then, it wasn't called carnivore. Um, it's called zero carb, but it's eliminating all the plant foods and just eating meat and animal products. And I said, I'm in. Let's give it a try. At this point, I was willing to try anything because, my naturopath had told me, that most 60-year-old women and older are on like 5 different medications. And I was like, I don't want to be one of those. I want to be healthy. I want to age gracefully and be healthy and active. And so, so we decided, and he just said he'd do it with me to support me, which was wonderful because I know so many of us in the carnivore community, so many of you listening to this right now, don't have a support system. That's why people like Dave are so wonderful to do these YouTubes. Thank you, Dave, to be a support system for those that don't have one at home. So anyway, we started doing carnivore. And in the meantime, I'd had more testing done by my naturopath, and it came back that I had severe leaky gut, is how she phrased it, and candida overgrowth. And at that point, this was end of August of 2018, I decided I was just going to eliminate everything but beef and water, which, there wasn't a name for it then. I just called it strict carnivore. Now, Michaela Peterson has coined the term the lion diet. So basically, I switched from eating anything, butter, lots of cream, dairy, all kinds of meats, to just beef and water. And I had a Herxheimer reaction. Now, many of you may not know what Herxheimer reaction means, but it's when your gut goes, oh my God, you're not giving me what I need, the bacteria in the gut, and they start dying off. And you can get physically sick and emotionally sick too. So I was one of those that for about 10 days felt like I had the flu and diarrhea and all that stuff. And I couldn't even eat very much either. I could drink some bone broth that we made at home and eat a little bit of burger. But gradually those symptoms went away as my gut bacteria switched over. So that's really important, I think, for people to know when you're starting carnivore. Look at how you're reacting. Do you need to ease into it? Or like me, I just went full-fledged from keto right into the strict carnivore. But I started feeling better, and then mainly just ate burgers with the fat. I loved the rendered fat. My body was craving that fat, and started eating. I ate ribeye steaks mostly. I like ribeye the best. I think a lot of us do because of that nice marbling and fat content. And I started feeling better and better. I had even given up coffee. That's the one non-carnivore food I still do have occasionally is coffee. I kind of go in and out of it sometimes, but I'd given it all up, just beef and water. And at the 3-month mark, I was feeling just so much better. My energy level had really come up. Some of my aches and pains they were still there, but they weren't as bad. And I was just, feeling this is good. Let's keep going. Now at that point I did add, I think, coffee back in, but otherwise I stayed beef and water. And I think we may have occasionally had some lamb too. And at the 6-month mark, I started doing some intermittent fasting as well. And I would say about 8 months into my carnivore journey, I woke up one morning. Now, I remember I mentioned my shoulders and the shoulder pain. Not only had I had shoulder pain, I had neck pain and the low back stuff, the aches and pains we think are normal aging. But especially the right shoulder had still been real problematic, and still we were worried it could get frozen. I woke up one morning, went to bed that night with still these aches and pains, woke up the next morning. It was all gone. The pain was all gone. I could freely move my shoulders. I just, it was a miracle. I mean, that's the only word I could put to it is like, by the grace of God or great spirit or whatever you call your higher power, it was a miracle, Dave. And that came out about the 8-month mark. And I don't know if introducing fasting, with the autophagy benefits of fasting, if that also kicked in with the carnivore. So that I know kind of a long story about how I got to carnivore. So I was an early into this carnivore way of eating, or at least as far as now there's a lot of people that are now on YouTube talking about and sharing their new journey. At that time, the first person, my partner and I found, my partner's name is Scott, and I'll share a little bit about his too, his journey with it. We found Dr. Kevin Stock. He's a dentist. Have you interviewed him yet, Dave? Kevin
I
Stock?
haven't had him on yet, but I am aware of him, yeah.
You would enjoy. I'd recommend talking with him. He's a fascinating guy, a bodybuilder, and he experiments a lot with his body. And he has a good program. At the time, he had a 3-tiered level of introducing yourself into carnivore, and that's what I had sort of followed. That first month. I'd been all the different carnivore foods, but then I jumped right to the third tier of just beef and water. And so following him really helped. I had a structure. But after that, I heard about Dr. Sean Baker because he would been on Joe Rogan and talked about his issues with being a doctor, and now the troubles he had with his the hospital and such, which was horrible that happens, but we know it does. Um, and I found him, and then during COVID, I found Dr. Ken Berry, and then as more and more doctors, Anthony Chafee, and oh gosh, we have so many wonderful Dr. Kiltz, as you know, and Chris Palmer, Georgia Ede, and um, oh my goodness, Dr. Westman, who's more keto than carnivore, but he supports carnivore, and just many others. I can't remember his name, but he calls himself the carb addiction doc. There's many people
Yeah.
now that
Dr.
are.
Cywes, yeah.
Yeah, that's his name. Thank you, Dave. And I just found Dr. Rick too recently. He's out of Des Moines, Iowa, and that's one of my old stomping grounds. Having lived in Iowa, I was born and raised in Dubuque, but I lived a little bit of time in Des Moines. So watching his videos when he showed one of going to the Iowa State Fair, and I'm like, I used to go there. So he has really good energy. So so you know, that was how I got the carnivore. And I'll tell you, at 6 month, that 6 month mark, I looked at Scott, my partner, and I said, I want to do this another 6 months. And at that year mark, I looked at him and I said, I'm not going back. There's no reason to go back to the way I used to eat. This is the best I have felt since I was young, 20s maybe. It really was magical. Joint pain was all gone. I had no more UTIs or migraines. My energy level was up. I was seeing clients and starting to rebuild my business in the healing arts. And I was actually at that point I was debating about starting a YouTube channel, and not knowing what to call it. At that point I wasn't calling it carnivore. I was just calling it a meat based or zero carb way of eating. But my son, one of my children, my son, and my partner said, you sound too preachy about it. I would hold off. Because I was just like, why wouldn't anybody want to try this? You feel so good. And things go away, that the problems you're having physically, mentally, emotionally go away. About partway in that first year, I have 4 adult children, and my youngest son who was still living in Iowa. He was only 20 at that time, and he discovered he was overweight. He'd been overweight for a while, and he also had very severe depression that he had throughout high school, and medications he didn't work. He did see a therapist for help, but um, and he had been listening to Jordan Peterson. That was one of the people he was following. And he called me up from Iowa, because I'm here in Arizona. And he says, Mom, this Jordan Peterson is having real success with that meat based diet that you and Scott are doing. If I came down for a couple of weeks, got some time off work, could you help me with this? So he did. He flew down. He got a couple of weeks off work, and he came down, and he loves meat, so it was easy for him. He switched to it, and in
And sorry, just to jump in, I think you were starting to say, were you starting to say he was pre-diabetic?
he was pre-diabetic. Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, you know how he discovered he was getting his hair cut, and the cosmetologist who was cutting his hair could see, do you get spots on the back of your neck, I guess, or something. And she said, you better go see your doctor. I think you're pre-diabetic or diabetic. So he did. He got an appointment to go see his doctor. And the doctor said, yes, you are pre-diabetic. You need to do so. They didn't put him on medication, but they wanted him to do something about it. Yeah. So at age 20, and that's the thing a lot of our doctor friends on YouTube talk about, is how it's so unusual. We have so many children that are pre-diabetic or diabetic due to all the kinds of foods that they're fed. And he was one of those. He was one of those that was a pizza and donut lover, right? So, but he switched to carnivore. He went back to Iowa, and he was, even though he had no other support other than me and my partner Scott, he did well with it. And in a year's time, he lost 100 pounds. But the miracle for 100 pounds in a year he dropped. Yeah, yeah, at age 20. And then at about the 3-month mark, I noticed a real difference in his demeanor and his attitude. His depression went away. And he said, Mom, I don't feel depressed anymore. It just, like, he could feel it lift off of him at about the 3-month mark. And we see that we have, Dr. Chris Palmer and Dr. Georgia Ede. They study this. They've written books about it. But before I was aware of any of these people on YouTube, I saw it in my son, how this depression just lifted. He was more confident, more outgoing. Life was brighter for him. So he still is, I would call ketovore. He eats leans a little more keto now than strict carnivore, but it works for him. And he's doing well. And yay. So
And no longer pre-diabetic?
no, no, no. All his blood work seems good. So he's doing well. He's sedentary. He's on his computer a lot. And so he did gain back about 20 or 25 pounds, but he started working out again. And just by working out, he's lost 30 pounds. So he's lost it again. So, well, he has a dog that he walks. So that helps. When you have a dog that gets you out walking, that helps. And my partner, he has stayed carnivore most of this time. He did take a brief time, about 5 months, where he went back to trying a lean protein, high carb diet for bodybuilding. He listens to all these bodybuilding experts. Decided he didn't feel well and is back to carnivore and feeling much, much better. So he eats a more relaxed version of carnivore than I do. I have to stay pretty strict. And I'll get into that in a minute. But can I share an interesting funny with you that your listeners may like to hear? And I'm talking going way back into the earlier 2000s, when I was vegetarian for about 3 years. Now I'm in the woo-woo market. I'm a licensed massage therapist, a psychic medium. I give a lot of readings for people, and I do different types of energy healing, Reiki, and I've studied different types shamanic style healing, like Hawaiian shamanic body work, and the Peruvian style of shamanism, and others, many others. I've studied with quite a few different really good teachers in the healing arts. But while I was vegetarian, um, well, I'll just preface. It's This is my belief system. I don't expect anybody to follow my belief system, but people who do, I do teach some of this work too, some of what I do. But I believe in angels and spirit guides and power animals. And during that time, I just like to share this story. When I was vegetarian, the spirit of the salmon kept coming to me and saying, I have what you need. You have to start eating me. I resisted for about 5 or 6 months, but it kept coming in my both my dreaming, sleep dreaming time, and my conscious dreaming. And then the other one was, if you've ever heard of Hathor, the Egyptian goddess that has the head of the cow. Um, that's, if you study the Egyptian pantheon, the Egyptian mythology, she's the one with kind of the head of the cow and representative of motherhood and nurturing and such. But she started coming to me as well, more as not just a single goddess, like multiple goddesses, and saying, we have what you need. We have what you need. And I couldn't quite figure it out. Well, now I understand. Well, the salmon I totally understood, and then I stopped vegetarianism in the mid 2000, like 2007 or so. I stopped eating vegetarian and started eating the salmon and the fish, and they were right. I felt much better, right? Zing, your brain is alive again. And um but I never really understood the Hathor, the cow goddess, until I became vegetarian. I'm like, wow, even way back, or until I became carnivore, left the plant based paradigm and became carnivore. I didn't really understand that message. We have what you need. Well, now I know, cows, beef, lamb, whatever red meat you're eating is, as Ken Berry would say, our proper human diet food, right?
Mm. So, does not being plant-based anymore make you a bit of an outcast in your profession?
Yes, and I would like to share a little bit about that too. Um, it's very prevalent in the healing arts. There's many teachers and thought leaders that still advocate that plant-based is better, right? Even one of my shaman teacher I mentioned earlier, even though he was uh, very supportive and of keto, going keto, he still felt you should only eat red meat once a week, right? That it should still be highly plant based. So, um, and I years ago when I was, you know, starting to do training to do what I do, yes, you might be able to hang out a shingle and do readings, but I'm one of those that I've studied and trained, and I've taken lots of classes with people who are very good in mediumship and psychic work and angel work and so on. So again, this was back in the early 2000s. Um, I was following a woman who was considered the angel expert. She came out with the first angel oracle cards and wrote books about angel therapy. And she told you won't be a good reader, you won't be spiritual if you eat meat. Well, I fell for that propaganda. That's why I went vegetarian for the third time in my life, as I believed what she was saying, that if I ate meat, oh, that's going to clog me up energetically. It's going to clog up my chakras, and my energy field's not going to be as clear, and I won't be able to give as good a readings or healings, and I won't be as spiritually connected. Well, that's a bunch of hogwash is the word I'll use instead of another word. but but that's the danger in my field, is if you kind of put somebody on a pedestal and you think they're a really good teacher, or better than you are in what you do, and you want to learn from them, and then they tell you you need to eat this way. It you can really get caught up in that, and you have to be so careful about that, because it's not true. By eating our proper human diet, our body is more available. Our energy field is more available. I tell you, I can see clients all day long. I can create courses and videos and teach classes. And I have the energy, and my clients, they they're really happy with the results they get. And I don't want to, spend a lot of time tooting my horn. It's just I'm very passionate about what I do. I'm very passionate about serving spirit and connecting the spirit world with my clients in whatever way they need. And I'm better at it now than I was when I was plant based. I even went through a period where I did the green smoothies. That was a thing for a while back in, oh, I don't know, it was before I moved to Arizona. So maybe 2016 or so. My joint pain got worse. My headaches got worse. What was that about? So, and I used to have a cupboard full of supplements, all the different supplements you're supposed to take. I threw all those away. I don't need those. I do take a sports salt, the electrolytes, and that's about it. So, yeah, but my thing about being in the healing arts, it's partly another reason I didn't start any YouTube channel. I do have a YouTube channel, but I haven't done much with it yet. Um, is so many of my friends, colleagues don't just wouldn't believe. In fact, there's been a few where I've mentioned it to me and they just go cross-eyed, like, you do what? You eat all that meat? You don't eat plants? You don't eat and they believe so strongly that you need to have the plants to heal your body instead of meat, that if you're eating meat, you're not going to be able to heal. They have it all backwards. And it's not my place to tell them they're wrong, but I even went to a retreat in Sedona a few years ago, and I brought all my meat with me so that I could cook my meat. And I was discriminated against. There was a small group. It was just a group of about a dozen women, and a few of them went to the person that was leading the retreat and complained about me cooking meat. But I had to smell their garlic and their pizzas and all their aromas. But they complained
It was
about
the smell.
it. Well, that's what they said. It was the smell of
You should
me.
have said, "Well, your broccoli smell is really getting up my nose as well."
Well, that's sort of what I said, all the garlic and spices they use. So there is that element of discrimination too, that and just that belief system. They follow people that are outspoken, have written books, that are invested in their businesses of touting a plant-based way of eating. And it hopefully it can shift. And maybe I should collaborate with a few other people that are, I know, like Phil Escott over in, I think, isn't he in England? I don't know if you've interviewed him yet or not, but I know he's kind of experienced that too. When he went from being vegan to carnivore, and how it's just such brainwashing um, in in the healing
I'd
arts world.
I'd
Yeah,
love to know your thoughts on this. This is just something that's
yeah,
popped into my head,
yeah.
is, like, sometimes I think there's this feeling in life
Uh-huh.
that the harder something is to do, the more virtuous it is. And
Yeah,
and
yeah.
if you eat just plants, if you subsist on just plants, then that's hard to do, right? Because you're always hungry.
You're always hungry. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it feels like, maybe those 2 things are somewhat connected. Like, if I'm virtuous because I'm eating only plants, because virtue is in hard work or something like that, you know?
You're onto something there, Dave. Definitely, there is that element to people feeling I'm virtuous, I'm more spiritual, I'm better than. You really have to be careful about about that. I once, without knowing, a friend of mine, when she was really feeling sick, and I recommended Carnivore, and she looked at me horrified. We were on Zoom. She looked at me horrified and says, "Oh, I'm vegan. I would never eat meat." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And she was going to do the Joe Dispenza work to do her healing, which is great. I'm a real advocate of using what tools you can use, whether it's, exercise, meditation. I'm a licensed massage therapist, so I'm a real believer in getting body work, energy work like Reiki, um, whether you go and get acupuncture or, many of the different therapies. Now we have red light therapy and so on, available, many different forms. I'm a real advocate of layering those types of energy therapies. And if you're in grief, and grief is holding you back, having a reading where you connect with your deceased son or your deceased mom can really be healing. Or you do some shamanic work to clean up a pattern or an imprint that's holding you back. And I tried all of that for my self healing because I'm immersed in it. Um, the missing ingredient was my diet. I wasn't eating the proper diet until I switched and found what we call carnivore now. So Ken Berry has it right, the proper human diet. And that's the base. Think of a pyramid, that's the base of our pyramid. So you can do all the energy work you want. You can change your belief system, change your patterns, follow those thought leaders. And I'm a real advocate of it. But if you're not supporting your cellular biology, our mitochondria, which converts our food to light. Isn't that amazing? Our mitochondria converts our food into ATP. Well, the P is phosphorus, which is light. Phosphorus is what's on those sparklers, that kids do. It's light. So if you're not giving our body what it needs to fuel itself and provide the energy, then these therapies, they aren't going to be real productive. And that's what I've discovered, Dave, is that you got to have the base of the pyramid in place. Now, I will give one caveat here. I was one of those that was injured by the vaccine that many of us took during COVID. And I'm not anti or pro vaccine. I feel like it's a personal decision. My decision to take the vaccine was based on some family and a friend with cancer that were pleading with me to please get it so I could be around them, or they didn't want me to be around them. And same with my partner, his mom. He wanted to go see his mom. And so we both looked at each other and said, okay, what harm can it do? Well, it did me harm. I blew up with rheumatoid arthritis that I've never had before, or at least that's what it's labeled by the doctors. And the UTIs have returned. But what I have found is when it starts to flare up, if I go lion diet, so if I'm, using occasionally some dairy and coffee and, maybe a few once in a while, a little keto something, I can flare. So if I go lion diet, the strict beef and water, that calms it down. So far, I haven't had to take any medication. I did work with a naturopath a year ago. And they use different IVs like the NAC and the NAD and the nutrient IVs. We suspect too, I knew I'd had mold exposure a few years ago. So they were also trying to eradicate any mold in my body because that can cause a lot of autoimmune issues as well. Um, so between something toxic that I reacted to in the vaccine and the mold exposure, so sometimes food is our basis, but if you're having other external things, a toxin that you're exposed to, and stress. I find that if times when I'm really stressed about something, I can flare up too. So in that case, carnivore, it doesn't cure it, but it sure helps calm it down. So I've
I
rec go ahead. Yeah, Dave?
I think, yeah, that goes back to what you said before, which is really important. Like, the
Yeah,
nutritional part is the foundation,
it
but,
is.
there are layers on that, like things like sleep and
Sleep.
stress and yeah, as
Mhm.
you say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been tracking this for a couple of years now, and last summer, fall, so a year ago, I did Lion Diet for about 4 or 5 months. I eliminated coffee again, and, um, things really calmed down really well. I don't have much problem with coffee. I can still have, like, a morning mug of coffee. I make it half calf or decaf generally. That usually doesn't bother me. But I find if I stray too much, like we had the Scott's grandkids a couple of weekends ago, so I bought a carton of keto ice cream. I eat that and my gut isn't happy. I'm just real sensitive. Scott isn't sensitive like that, but I am. So I have to pay attention. I eat too much of something and we got the loosey goosey going on.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
go,
and I can imagine, even the keto products, they've still got the preservatives and the flavorings and stuff like that in
They
there, you know?
do. Yeah, Dave, that's the thing. If you're gonna buy any of those products, you've got to really read the labels and see what kind of sweetener, because there's certain sweeteners my partner's discovered. I don't know which ones. I'd have to ask him again, but he's discovered can cause blood clots because he'd had a blood clot while he was the short time he went back to eating carbs. He got a blood clot. Um, and then he read that some of the sweeteners, artificial sweeteners, can lead to that. So you got to read the ingredients. You got to see what's in there. And those fillers or anything that says natural flavors can be anything. They don't tell you what's in those natural flavors. Can be MSG, can be all kinds of toxic stuff.
Yeah, I've always quite skeptical when I see in an ingredients list natural anything. Kind of feel like natural flavors means it tastes natural, not that it's actually from anything naturally occurring.
So I try to really limit even any of those keto products. I have made homemade ice cream and I do okay with that. But ice cream for me can be pretty addictive. So I don't do that very often. We find too what foods can get us roped back in and addictive. And ice cream is one of those. So I only will make a carnivore ice cream or a carnivore cheesecake or something like that for a special occasion, like somebody's birthday or Christmas. I stay pretty clean with, like, today I've had scrambled eggs and ground beef, and tonight I'll have a ribeye, and I usually eat about twice a day.
So,
Um,
yeah, that's a good point. So, too mad and pretty much is the same kind of food every day?
Most of the time, yeah, yeah. Eggs don't bother me too much. I do okay with eggs, but if I'm truly doing Lion Diet, then I stop the eggs too, just to clear my body, right? Reset everything. And it really does not only reset my physical body, it resets my energy body too, my chakras, my energy field, the whole works. I just generally feel better, and my gut
Mm.
calms down. That's the key. My gut is with the autoimmune leaky gut I used to have. My gut can be pretty sensitive, and when that starts to
Y
act up, I just go back to red meat, and once in a
yeah.
while something like lamb is for a different flavor. It's a different flavor too, but it's still red meat. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, nice. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's been about 6 years now.
yeah,
So, at
yeah.
this point, it's forever for you?
Yes, yes. I mean, I've experimented, as I mentioned. I've tried little keto things. If I go to Florida to visit my daughter and son-in-law, my two little grandkids, um, they eat a standard American diet. So once in a while, he grows strawberries and blueberries in his backyard. So once in a while, I'll try a couple of those, or I'll try a bite of avocado. Um, but that's very infrequent, and I don't think I've done that since I don't know, it's been months. Back in May, I think was the last time I had anything like that. So I stay pretty true just because I feel my best. And because when I stray, I can either get addicted to wanting that keto ice cream, or and I just don't feel good. My gut gets really unhappy, and my UTIs will flare up too. So, or the little bit of swelling and arthritis will swell up. So I pay attention to that, and it really is my medicine to go to just the red meat. That's my medicine, really here. So it makes a difference. So I'm just, I just wish more people would give it a try. Dave, people are afraid. I understand this in people. We're afraid to leave our paradigm. We're afraid to give up that favorite food. For me, the hardest thing is to say, okay, I'm not going to do coffee for 3 months. But after a few days of no coffee, I'm fine, right? You just have to get out of the pattern and that attachment you have. And that's
Right.
I help people with detaching from things.
Mm.
And I do have a number of clients that either they have a mental health issue where um, it's come up at the end of the reading. I'll say, I have a suggestion. Let me send you the YouTubes by Chris Palmer and Georgia Ede, and you can research it for yourself. And because of that, a few of my clients have made the switch to at least keto. Yeah, and I have one back in Iowa that he had been carnivore and slid off it. Now he's gone back to carnivore. So, um, but my other kids, my other three kids, when I started this way of eating, they just rolled their eyes and said, "Oh, mom's on another diet." But now they'll see,
Yeah.
yeah, oh, she's just on another fad diet thing. But I know they have my genetics. If they want to prevent these kind of health issues and prevent health issues my parents had, like heart disease and cancer, they should start paying attention to the way they eat. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the hardest you kinda touched on it there. I think the hardest thing is the paradigm, but it's the kind of the perspective.
Yeah.
Like, when you're on a regular diet,
Yeah.
um, you you can't imagine that food could have that much of an impact on the way you feel.
You
And
can't till you try it.
then yeah, and
Yeah.
the other thing is you kind of, you feel like for someone who's young, you feel good, right?
Mhm.
Just generally feel good. I mean, like,
Yeah.
when I was 20 years old, I could drink like a fish, in the evening, wake up
Mm,
with a bad hangover, drink a couple of cans of Coke, and I'd feel great.
you'd be fine. Yeah.
When you're 40, 50, 60, you can't do that, right? But, because in your 20s or your 30s, you feel good, you can't imagine that actually you probably aren't feeling as good as you think you are. And if
Right.
you just change the way you eat,
Mhm.
you could notice the difference. But convincing someone that actually you don't feel that good when they feel they do is a hard thing to do, right?
It is. My son-in-law, he's in his upper 30s now. He's a little bit older than my daughter, and he's had some high blood pressure and health issues and such. And I've shared with him that I could, help him in switching. My daughter would like to lose some weight, and I could help them, but they're still so ingrained in their world of, and in their social setting of, this is we eat these things, we cook these things, and we drink. And I must say, I used to be an avid wine drinker, but being carnivore, I don't have a taste for wine anymore. I don't care for it. It isn't something I want. So I'm happy to drink a seltzer water if I'm at a party instead. It's really scary for people to give it up. Plus, there's the mainstream, like people saying, "Oh, you eat red meat, you're going to get heart disease. If you eat too much salt, you're going to get high blood pressure." There's still that old lot of that incorrect information. And I've always
Ri
had high cholesterol, so I don't worry about it. I had high cholesterol, Dave, 25 years ago, I was eating the low fat, high carb, and I was running marathons. I was training for marathons and running marathons. I went to the doctor, had my blood work done, your annual. She saw my cholesterol was high, and she said to me, "You need to eat less and exercise more." And I scratch my head and go, I just ran 10 miles today. Exercise more? What are you talking about? It just made no sense to me at all that they would say that.
Right, and often this advice, I mean, not your specific doctor necessarily, but often this advice comes from a totally sedentary doctor that looks like they're
Yeah.
totally sedentary, right?
Yeah, a lot of them are because they don't have time. They're busy. In my former life, I was married to a doctor, but he made time to work out. And I'm been long divorced, and my partner, he's almost 9 years now. He likes to do CrossFit and he likes to do bodybuilding. And today at lunch, he had today off. And I said, I'm going to be interviewed by Dave today. What can I share from you, your experience with carnivore? And he kind of thought about it and he says, well, first of all, it gives me a lot more energy. And I don't have the energy drops and highs and lows that he used to have. And he says it keeps his mood stable because he, kind of like my son, was a little prone to depression. Had tried, before I knew him, had tried medicines for depression and didn't like any of them. So he says it really keeps his mood stable, and his libido better. So, that's the thing. Even at our age, libido's important here. So,
Well, it is,
yeah,
because like nutrition, it's a fundamental part of being human, right?
it is. You want that connection, with your partner, with your body, with yourself. It's all part of being human. And being human, we're not meant to suffer. We're meant to have pleasure, Dave.
Exactly, and this is the thing. We shouldn't accept that it's like we just get older and everything stops working.
Right.
We just should no longer accept that because that isn't the way it's meant to be.
And that's why I said, I think at the beginning of the interview, my goal when I moved here and tried to and found this carnivore way of eating, my goal is to age gracefully, to enjoy life, to be active. I want to live an active life, and I do. I walk most mornings now. Of course, here in Arizona, we've had a very hot summer, so I get up early and get my walk in before it got too hot. We have in my community here a lovely gym, and I go there a couple times a week and lift weights. But I also have resistance bands and light weights here, so I sometimes do little bits here or go out on my patio and look at the mountains. I have a beautiful view of the mountains, and do my weightlifting. So whatever you love to do, bike riding, swimming, mountain climbing, you want to feel good in your body so you can do it. Yeah, yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
So if you've got someone in front of you, a friend or a
Mhm,
client, and they're saying, "Look, I'm very skeptical of this carnivore thing,
mhm,
but I see how well you're doing, so I'm willing to give it 90 days to give it a try.
mhm.
Give me some recommendations." What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, if it's during a reading, I say let's talk about this once we finish the reading, because I don't want to interrupt the flow of spirit, whatever is coming through for them, or their healing session on the table or whatever it is. But then afterwards, I'll sit with them and I'll say, look, first of all, you need a support community. And even though I charge for my other services, I do not charge for helping people start keto carnivore journey, whatever that is. It's something I just do to be of service. And so I'll first I tell them, you need to have a support system, and you need to look at what your why is. Why do you want to do this? What's your why? Because once you tap into that energy, that motivation of why you want to do it, then you stop and think about that before you reach for that bag of Doritos or that pint of ice cream or that Coca Cola you used to drink. You stop and go, to your why. Why am I doing this? So it depends on what their flexibility is. Is keto a better starting point, or, you know, is carnivore? I kind of talk with them about where they're at and then guide them to, let me help them and suggest, what foods to look for, where to look for those. For instance, you can obviously go to your grocery store, or Target actually has great steaks. I don't know what their source is, though. Or your local butcher, or find a rancher. I talk with them about where they're living, what their sources are for food, and how they're going to feel. I talk about the first, that 1 month isn't a fair assessment. I say, it's important to give it, I suggest 90 days. That's my suggestion. And I said, think about how quickly 90 days passes. Look back 90 days and how quickly you've gone from there to here. You can do this for 90 days. And if you're not happy with it, go back to what you're doing. It's not forever unless you choose, like I have, that you want it to be forever because it works so well, right? So that's where I start with them. I help them feel into why they want to do this, and really make a commitment to that why. And also to know, if they go off the bandwagon one day, that's okay. Just start again the next day. Don't beat yourself up. You're not a bad person. That these foods that we tend to eat when you're standard American diet are meant to be addictive, are meant to be hard to give up. But once you get past, I think that 1 month mark, once you pass that, it gets easier and easier and easier. I know somebody that tried it for 2 weeks and gave up. Well, I could have quit at the 2 week mark. I had felt so lousy in my first 2 weeks of strict carnivore, but I didn't. You've got to give it time. You got to give your gut bacteria time to switch over, your cells to start working differently, your whole body, and your brain. Your brain has to start working differently. And that takes time. So I offer to be available for them, and they can reach out to me, and I'm happy to help. And then I also send them a lot of YouTube links. So, I've sent people yours before. I've sent people, obviously, women or people that are having trouble conceiving. I send them Dr. Kiltz's YouTubes. It's kind of like, where are they at? If they're having mental health issues, I send them Chris Palmer and Georgia Eads. Um, Even Sally Norton, the oxalate person, if I feel like they might have an oxalate problem, I send them hers. I have a lot of the books, so I've lent them to people. But the interesting thing, Dave, they can hear it all they want from me, but it isn't until a white coat tells them that they pay attention. And that happened recently. A friend of mine from Iowa, I've talked with her about this ever since I went carnivore, because she thought I was going to kill myself doing this. And now she's keto because her doctor told her she needed to go keto. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's just it's a sad
Yeah,
fact that we've
yeah,
we've got to the point where we trust what
yeah,
these people say, even though once you understand they have very little understanding of nutrition,
right.
probably less than the average person. Um,
But
yeah,
it's
once
still, they got the doctor, and
uh,
people really still are in that paradigm of following their, I think, well, within our carnivore and keto communities, we see that changing. But it is grassroots. It's people like you and me and all of you listening to this. We're the ones that are making the change. And who is it? Carrie, of Homestead House. Have you talked with him too? He's doing the documentary.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, I've had Kerry on, and I've been on
yeah,
Kerry's channel,
I
and we're
thought you
catching
had.
up in about a month's time. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'll have to watch for that. It's people who are passionate and out there making the changes that are going to, it's getting there. It's a lot bigger than when I started. Nobody had heard of it. I mean, but now,
Right.
now people know of it. whether they
Yeah.
agree with it or not. I have a doctor friend here in my community, lovely lady, but and she actually was one of the researchers out in New York in that big women's initiative they did years ago. And no, she's still not a fan of keto or carnivore, so I just don't discuss it with her. She just won't. She shuts down when I bring it up. So it's still,
Yeah.
getting more in the medical profession to take a look. And as most of the doctors say, it's their own health issues that have propelled them to
Yeah.
take a look.
And, you can kinda understand this in the way that someone spent hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on their education,
Yes, yeah,
and they
yeah.
spent all this time kind of receiving this input
Mhm.
and passing whatever examinations they need to do and going through their internships and whatever they've done.
Yeah,
And then they've got, random people like us
yeah,
saying, "Well, keto or carnivore," and they're like, "I don't wanna hear this
right,
because, you're telling me I've wasted 10, 15 years of my life."
right. Well, this person I'm referencing, she also had breast cancer. She's recovered from it during COVID. And she was one of the ones I was helping her and walking her dog and coming and giving her Reiki and foot massage and doing, just pampering her a little bit because it was a struggle. Um, I would have loved to have shared Dr. Seyfried's stuff with her, but she's just not open to it. And I know another person, a medium, who has been given 6 months with her cancer, and I would love to send her some of this information, but she's made it really clear she doesn't want any input from people. So, you have to respect that. If that's their choice, then, I do my best not to judge because my space here in the work I do is your judgment free zone, your safe zone, your sacred space where you can feel safe and open for any healing that needs to happen. So if I start judging people because they drink a can of Coke or because they eat, whatever, then I'm not being that safe zone. Yet I like to plant seeds. And when it's appropriate, when spirit nudges me and says, mention this, I mention it, and then I say, if you're interested in knowing more about this after the reading's over, I'll take an extra 10 or 15 minutes and share this with you. And that's how I approach it. I try to be really ethical with it. So, yeah, yeah.
So, on that, how can people reach out to you, Carol? Do you have a website or
I
any other
do.
contact?
I do. It's www.carolann.psychicmedium.com. So that's Carol Ann psychicmedium.com. And that's when you go to my webpage, there's a place where you can um, ask, for me to get an email from you and ask questions. That's probably the best way to find me. I do have an email too. It's carol@carolanpsychicmedium.com. So it's really similar. It's one of those GoDaddy domains, right? So carol@carolanpsychicmedium.com. You can email me directly at that email too, if you like.
No worries.
I am
And
just, I'm here to serve. I'm here to help. I'm here to uplift. And eating meat is one of the best places to start.
yeah,
It really is.
definitely. So I'll link to your website and your email in the show notes.
Okay.
Carol, thank you so much for coming on and
Oh,
sharing your story. Really appreciate your time.
thank you, Dave. And thank you to all who are listening. And go carnivore, keep at it, stick with it, and keep listening to Dave. You have wonderful content. So thank you for having me.